Finance and Investment Committee to order. This meeting is actually being held online and virtually, and because of that, I need to read this statement. This meeting of the Budget and Finance Committee is being conducted electronically pursuant to Governor Bill Lee's Executive Order 16. I would ask for a motion that conducting the meeting electronically is necessary to protect public health, safety, and welfare in light of the coronavirus. And I'll entertain a motion.
So moved.
Commissioner Dodd made the motion. Second by Commissioner Piercy. Any votes we do will be roll call. And Mark, why don't you call roll for us?
Commissioner Allen?
Here.
Commissioner Dodd?
Here.
Commissioner Gooch? Commissioner Gooch?
Here.
This is a motion to approve this being televised virtually. Okay.
Commissioner Johnson?
Yes.
Commissioner Johnson?
Yes.
Commissioner Piercy? Commissioner
If that
Piercy?
mic's not on, he didn't hear.
Commissioner Stevens?
Yes. Are we doing roll call or are we voting on a motion?
We're voting on a motion. That's why I made the statement.
Commissioner P?
Yes. And I assume that those here votes were also in favor of this being an electronic vote. So I declare that that motion passed. Commissioner Johnson, you have a question?
Yes.
Okay, thank you, sir. All right, having said that, the first thing on our agenda is to give a update of the COVID-19 pandemic. And we're going to call on our Mayor, Ketron, to address that.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Just wanted to give everyone an update on where we were. It should be before you, starting with the COVID-19 pandemic update. On 2/28, we had a PSA that actually with Carl Hudgens talking about people to start bumping and not shaking hands. And of course, it later evolved into the 6-foot distance, but we were on to it back in February, knowing that we needed to start taking precautions at that point in time. On 3/5, we had an emergency meeting, countywide elected officials and all department heads, and told them to start preparing for this pandemic. On 3/20, all mayors in the county, we had a meeting at the hospital at St. Thomas Rutherford with all the CEOs of the hospitals, Stonecrest, St. Thomas Rutherford, and MMC, and Trust Point, along with our EMS director, preparing for what we had no idea. We all were guessing of where we were going into uncharted waters at that point in time. On 3/25, we interviewed Mr. Chris Clark for the new public safety director position, and that same afternoon, after all the interviews had been concluded, made the offer to bring him on board as our new public safety director. On that same afternoon, he partially opened officially the EOC to start preparing for the days to come. On 3/29, all mayors had a meeting, an emergency meeting with all the first responders, directors, and all hospital CEOs. That was held in this chamber on a Sunday afternoon. On 3/30, a call was made to TEMA. I requested 100 face shields because we had found out that Nissan was actually manufacturing those right here in our county. And the very next day after that phone call, 150, I believe, Chris, is that correct, were actually delivered to our EOC and then distributed out to our first responders. On 3/30, all the mayors had a conference call. On 3/31, I was requested by our director of EMS to purchase 14 air surface disinfection UV lights There were 14 for a total of $56,910. Those UV lights actually are placed inside the ambulance and even offered to the sheriff's department. And within, Chris, 20 minutes, it will totally disinfect the ambulance. So they'll be prepared to go out and the ambulance will be disinfected to pick up the next patient. On 4-3, all mayors, we had a conference call trying to plan our strategy as well as our talking points and what the messages were going to be through all of our PIOs, that the same message would be the same throughout all the cities and the county. On 4-6, we purchased 10,000 N95 FDA certified masks for a total of $44.20. One day before that, they were $4. Everybody was competing to try to get these masks from all over the country and the world. On 4-7, we purchased 3 refrigerator trailers. We received, for a total, all 3, they were $7,500 a piece, for a total of $22,500. We received the first 2 today, and they were placed at an undisclosed location and at the direction of our director of EMS. These will be the problem that we're having. They're not COVID related, the reason to buy these refrigerated trucks. But many of you have seen in the past, we average out of the budget every year, we're spending about $600,000 to run autopsies on people who expire either through suicide or drug overdoses. And we have to, every time that happens, we have to send them to Nashville. It's the only location in the whole mid-state area. 52 counties are actually participating in the mid-state area and send their requests for autopsies to the facility in Nashville. Because of COVID and other counties having the same problem, the facility in Nashville is backed up. And to run autopsies right now, there is a delay close to 8 to 9 months. Stones River has 2 cooling drawers. St. Thomas Rutherford has 6. There is no other place to put these bodies until the autopsies can be run. So that was the purpose of purchasing these 3 refrigerated trailer units. They are used, but we checked them out with Cal Refrigeration in Nashville just to make sure that they're worthy and mechanically sound, and they were. On 4-8, we purchased 5,000 additional N95 FDA certified masks for a total of $21,160. They came in this morning at 9:30, and they're being distributed along with the other 10,000 that we received to all first responders. This is not just Rutherford County, all the cities, first responders, police, fire, and our EMS are all participating. And so Chris was able to get those all distributed. At the bottom, you'll see Cigna Wellness Program. Mr. Elam is here tonight. He came to me yesterday. Every year, because of the wellness program that we have sponsored by, I got to take this off, sponsored by Cigna. Because of the large plan, we get money back to use, the county gets money back to buy things for our members on the wellness plan, as long as it helps improve their health, which will decrease the amount that we have to pay out for health insurance, okay? So we're estimating somewhere between $30,000 and $40,000 we'll have access to through that plan that Cigna will cut us a check for, as long as we have the receipts, which we do. I have those receipts here for the mask and everything else, so we should be able to turn that in, because they changed the rules just this past week and said that we could turn in the receipts for anything COVID-19 related. So that should be a nice help in reducing these costs that we had to purchase on an emergency services basis. Any questions from that point? I felt it was good that I was expending money on behalf of the county because it was an emergency, that I needed to keep the Budget and Finance Committee up to date on where we were on that. Any other questions? Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mayor Ketron. The next order of business, we're going to go ahead and approve the minutes of March 5th, 2020 meeting.
Mr. Chair, I have reviewed those minutes and find everything to be in order, so I would move for approval.
I have a motion, Commissioner Gooch, second by Commissioner Johnson. And if you would, call roll, Mark.
Commissioner Allen,
Aye.
Commissioner Dodd,
Yes.
Commissioner Gooch,
Yes.
Commissioner Johnson,
Yes.
Commissioner Piercy,
Yes.
Commissioner Stevens,
Yes.
Commissioner P.
Yes, and the motion carries. The next order of business would normally be the investment report, but since we're trying to maintain our social distancing, if it's okay with the committee, I'm going to skip to number 13 and ask Mr. Mitchell to come forward to present his item.
Feel like Bane. There we go. I can breathe a little bit there. My request is to transfer $10,000 from data processing equipment into data processing services to allow us to implement a contingency of operations software that will allow us to operate remotely on the transfer of deeds from the Registry of Deeds office and import them into the assessor's office.
Anyone have any questions for Mr. Mitchell? And one thing I'll point out, this is within his budget.
Mr. Chairman, would it be in order for, go ahead and take both of these requests at the same time?
That's okay with the committee, I would say yes. Go ahead with your second.
My second is to transfer $3,000 from our, I don't have this up here, Lisa, from full-time payroll over into part-time to account for money that we're going to need to manually input the tangible personal property schedules on time.
And that's also within your budget.
It's also inside of our budget, yes, sir.
Okay, you've heard the request. Entertain a motion or questions.
Motion to approve the request.
I have a motion from Commissioner Johnson. Second, Commissioner Dodd. Okay, are there any questions?
I have a question, Mr. Chairman.
Commissioner Stevens, go ahead.
Is this a one-time expense on the software, or is it something that's going to be a recurring expense in the future over and over?
He asked if it's going to be a reoccurring expense on the software, something that will come up every year, or is that a one-time cost?
It's a monthly subscription that's cancelable after 30 days.
And so the amount that you're asking for will cover you for how many months?
It'll cover us through June.
Okay, that answer your question, Commissioner Stevens?
So the plan is to cancel it in June, or are we going to add this and keep it permanently?
We've made a request to add it in there that we'll bring up at the regular budget.
Okay, so he does want to make that reoccurring, and it would be a monthly fee. What's the monthly fee on that?
$3,300.
So the monthly fee would be $33.90?
$3,300.
Okay, $3,300, excuse me. Any other questions? Hearing none, we'll call roll, please.
Commissioner Allen,
Aye.
Commissioner Dodd,
Yes.
Commissioner Gooch,
Yes.
Commissioner Johnson,
Yes.
Commissioner Piercy,
Yes.
Commissioner Stevens,
Yes.
Commissioner P.
Yes, motion carries. Thank you. Okay, now, Let me go ahead and get our minutes approved, or well, no, we have done that, haven't we? Okay. Mark, I'll have you beside me here to goad me when we're keeping me online. All right, first thing is the investment report, and Ms. Lisa.
Okay. All right, so the first is his report, and there were no bidding of monies during this month. However, at the end for March, the LGIP rate is 1.37, but he's getting 26 basis points above that, and his banking arrangements, that brings it to 1.63%. That's his report, but he does have a budget amendment as well. And the amendment, do I need, I'll just,
Let's approve the report first.
okay.
Do I hear a motion on the report or any questions?
Motion to approve.
Commissioner Piercy makes a motion to approve. Do I hear a second? Commissioner Dodd seconded that motion. Call roll, please.
Commissioner Allen?
Yes.
Commissioner Dodd?
Yes.
Commissioner Gooch?
Yes.
Commissioner Johnson?
Yes.
Commissioner Piercy?
Yes.
Commissioner Stevens?
Yes.
Commissioner P?
Yes, motion carries. Okay, go ahead, Lisa.
Okay, so the next is the trustees' budget amendment to provide additional funds for the tax relief program. This is where the county provides $2 for every $1 that the state provides for those folks that are eligible. When we looked at this, we think he's going to need another $65,500 into that account, and we're requesting that out of the unassigned fund balance. That brings the estimated total that is for this year, and we'll roll that into next year, $715,500 that the county provides for those individuals that meet the requirements to get tax relief.
Anyone have any questions on the tax relief item? Hearing none, I'll entertain a motion.
Move to approve.
Commissioner Gooch makes a motion, Commissioner Johnson seconds. Any other discussion? Hearing none, call roll, Mark.
Commissioner Allen?
Yes.
Commissioner Dodd?
Yes.
Commissioner Gooch?
Yes.
Commissioner Johnson?
Yes.
Commissioner Piercy?
Yes.
Commissioner Stevens?
Yes.
Commissioner P?
Yes, motion carries. All right, next item on the agenda is the fund condition report.
Starting with the development tax, in March, we received $502,500. That brings our total for the fiscal year to $5,012,250. Moving to the cash report for all funds. At the end of March, we had $332,532,000, with $298,784,000 being operating funds, $33,748,000 being borrowed funds. Unless there is a question, I'll move on to the revenue review. You know, if we didn't have to worry about what we're worrying about today, when we close March, the county's in great shape as far as our revenue estimates. If you look down, all indicators are green. At the end of March, tax collections were at 96.6% of the tax roll. I remind you, we budget at 95.5%, so you already know that all the property tax lines are going to be improved. Development tax, I already mentioned, is 16.6% higher than it was last year. Hotel motel tax at the end of March was 2.9% higher. Sales tax countywide is 4.77% higher than the prior year. That's with the estimate that we started the year at 3.2%. If you go to the second page and looking at our debt service fund, that's the one that pretty much, as I mentioned, the development tax, how much that has come in. We are at 99.26% collected of our budgeted revenue in our debt service. So that is the end of my report.
Heard the report. Are there any questions? I've got quite a few myself. Mainly is, have you been looking ahead? Because we're definitely going to be seeing a dip in these revenues. Are you making estimates to, or can you?
You know, right now it's a guess because we just finished March, and those businesses that report to their sales tax to the state, they report it in April, and then the state reports to us in May. So I haven't a clue. I'm sure it's less. The one concern would be development tax, not development tax, hotel motel tax. That's the one that's going to really get us. And we generally get about half the revenue at this point in the year, and the other half makes up in the last part of the year. So I would estimate that revenue stream being half of what we normally get. Probably half of what we budgeted, if not a little less.
Well, we know we've got some tough times ahead of us, and we'll have to take appropriate action for that as it comes. You've heard her report. Do I hear a motion to approve the report?
Motion to approve, Mr. Chairman.
Okay.
And a second.
And Commissioner Dodd, second. Are any discussions or further questions? Hearing none, call roll, Mark.
Commissioner Allen?
Yes.
Commissioner Dodd? Commissioner Gooch?
Yes for Gooch.
Commissioner Johnson?
Yes.
Commissioner Piercy?
Yes.
Commissioner Stevens?
Yes.
Commissioner P?
Yes, motion carries. I want to pause from our agenda for just a moment and possibly call on Commissioner Gooch for a prayer. We've been given some information that's troubling, so.
That information is Commissioner Steve Irvin, our chaplain, is being, I think, rushed to the hospital, not looking really good from my understanding. So if you would indulge, I would like to offer a prayer for his behalf. Oh, Father, we love you and we praise your name, for we know that all good comes from you. At this time, Father, we want you to put your healing hand on our brother Steve Irvin. Father, we also ask that you will surround his family. We know that times are tough as far as the crisis that we're going through, and they may have limited access to put their hands on him and to pray for him in his presence. Father, we know that you can do miracles. We just ask whatever is ailing him at this time, that you will just zap it out and return him to being whole. Father, we are so appreciative of your Son, Jesus Christ, and we pray for that day in which every knee will bow before his throne and every tongue confess that Jesus is our Lord. And until that day comes, may the grace of God, the love of Jesus Christ, and the fellowship of the Holy Ghost dwell in our hearts today and forevermore. And it's through Jesus' name that we pray. Amen.
Amen.
Thank you, Commissioner. Okay, our next item on our agenda, let's see, we'll call up Mr. Eglin and the Risk Management Financial Report.
If you look at the 264 fund, looking at calendar year, you see the revenues at $25,493,138. You see expenditures at $19,965,484. For the fiscal year, you see the revenue at $57,365,117. The expenditures at $59,249,085. I want you to look at the graph bottom, and you see for March of this year and March of last year that you see a spike for both years. This is the pharmacy rebate that comes in on an annual basis. When we flip over to a second to see the tracker, you will see where that shows up again, but I just wanted to point that out on the graph. And we're also talking to Cigna and getting that on a quarterly basis instead of an annual basis. So next year, you may not see that same spike because it'll be done on a quarterly basis. If you flip over to the tracker, you'll see that there was 6,252 enrollments. And if you want to look at what we had for the month, you will see, if you want to go down to the fiscal year 2019, 2020, you see for this month there was $10,938,074 taken in revenue, and claims was $6,628,774. And you can see this year there's a difference of $4,309,301. If you look at in a comparison, I'm going to spend a little more time on the tracker because we're doing health insurance rates and medical rates. Anyway, I want you to look at the March 2019 above that. You see that you took in, there was a difference of $4,860,630 this time last year. So you see that there's less than about $500,000 if you look at that. And then if you move over to the this time last year for the total, where there was, at the end of the fiscal year, you see that there was $5,608,649. This year, with 3 months left, we're $1.8 million behind. So it's very doubtful that we'll make up and have the same spread as we had last year. So to break even, the 1.8 million, if you compare it to what's up top for revenue less expenditures for April 19, May 19, and June 2019, if we get the same thing that we got last year, then we should make up that $1.8 million. But it's trending and you'll see it in the rates, what the recommendation is. It's trending that we need to increase the rates due to this tracker that you see here in front of you. And when you look down at the fiscal year difference in revenue and expenditures, the very bottom two lines, it also tells you the difference in the revenue and expenditures. You want to try to get very close. You don't want to overcharge employees on revenue, in the revenue, and of course not the county either. And so as we're trending upward a little bit in expenditures. So again, you'll see that reflection of the pharmacy in March, the rebate of that 6.6, 3.3 million of that is the pharmacy rebate. $266 fund, if you see March, you can see that your claims were higher in the 266 fund this year compared to last year. And if you move over to the next page in the 266 fund, if you go under the month of March in the tracker, you'll see that there's, for the 2020 March, it was $79,985.54. And last year it was $49,729.33. If you go to your far left, you'll see a box that says year to date. You'll have $402,437.57 compared to last year it was $552,648.60. So we're running about 73% in workers' comp, less than what we were last year. And just to break that $79,000 number down, because sometimes people want to ask, workers' comp on that part was $8,387. OJI was $71,598. So the majority of that this time was OJI. And one thing that I will point out is that with all of the schools closed, and what I will do moving forward on this for comparison next year is I'll make a notation about the coronavirus, because our workers' comp claims have reduced drastically because of the schools not being in session. So that number will be skewed tremendously compared to last year or this year. And then moving on to the liability legal expenses for the fiscal year, you will see Hudson Reed Macquarie for this month of March is $26,635.86. Mr. Chairman, that concludes my report.
Okay. Any questions on the report? If not, I'll entertain a motion.
Motion to approve.
Commissioner Johnson moves to approve. Do I hear a second? Commissioner Gooch seconds. Is there any further discussion, questions? Hearing none, Mark, call roll, please.
Commissioner Allen?
Yes.
Commissioner Dodd? Commissioner Dodd? Commissioner Gooch?
Yes.
Commissioner Johnson?
Yes.
Commissioner Piercy?
Yes.
Commissioner Stevens?
Yes.
Commissioner P?
Yes. Motion carries. Okay. Please continue, Ed.
Yes, sir. At this time, Chairman P, we have Mercer online, and they're going to give the presentation on the medical renewals for 2021. I will say this before we get started. It's a guessing game because we don't know what the coronavirus will do. And so what we're going to, give it our best shot at, what we think the rates will be. Keep in mind, these rates start 2021 of January, and they will go through 2021 of December. And so, what we're trying to set is a rate of some unknowns that's not out there. And sometimes you get it in some, pretty close, and sometimes you don't. So that's our attempt this time, is to try to find a balance. So, Jake, are you there?
I am. All
right.
Jake. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I'll do kind of like what I did last month with the on-site clinics. Let me maybe just kind of frame everything up for 5 or 6 minutes, and then I can open it up for some questions. And it kind of ties into what Mr. Elam was just going through on the tracker. But we have seen an increase in claims over the last 12 months. So similar to Ms. Nolan, when we do a projection like this, we look over the last 12 months, and then we're trying to project, as Mr. Elam was saying, for next year. So calendar year 2021. We do have a coronavirus projector that we use with our actuaries. And essentially at this moment, for Middle Tennessee, for Rutherford County, we are putting, this projection in our low risk category. We have different risk levels. And so luckily you're not in some of the hot spots. If you are a multi-site large client of ours, we may look at it differently, but at this point you're in a low risk area. So there is an element there of looking at non-essential services going down, kind of like some of your property and casualty claims are going down since the schools are closed. And then a potential increase in some of the coronavirus cases. But overall, when we look at that tracker right now for you guys, we are seeing about a 1 to 1.5% potential adjustment for this year in claims upward. So essentially, when I look at that, the potential risk of the coronavirus is almost offset by non-essential services being kind of administered at this time. So, that's what our actuarial formula is saying for you guys for this year. We're in the process of updating that for 2021, but because we're talking a point and a half, maybe that puts your mind at ease a little bit as we stand right now. So with that in mind, what we did do is look at the last 12 months of data. As Mr. Elam said, if you look at the tracker over the last few months, the claims have started to increase. We actually went back over the last 5 years, and because I know a lot of the commissioners have been on this committee for several years. So if you look back 5 years, we had a period of decreasing claims for a couple years. Last year, we started to see the increase. It started kind of creeping up in the single low digit increases. This year, we're starting seeing over the last 12 months compared to the previous, more of a mid single digits increase. And then honestly, what we've seen, if you look back in November, December of this past year, which is still in this period, those couple months there were two of the highest claims over the last couple years as far as a month. So there is definitely some concern as we go into projecting forward what we're looking at there. So when we did the projection this year, similar to our coronavirus analysis, we did 3 different projections. One kind of saying, here's a conservative approach, here's a moderate approach, here's an aggressive approach. And so when we looked at that, a conservative approach would be the increase ended up being around a 12% needed increase. A moderate approach was around 7.9% needed increase. And then if we really got aggressive, it would be around 3.9. When we met with the Insurance and Risk Management Department committee that was postponed, but we met with them earlier this week, we all kind of came to the conclusion to go with that moderate increase of 7.9. It does have a little bit of margin in there. It has more of the trend in there. But with the uncertainty of where we are with the coronavirus, we weren't really comfortable going with the aggressive at 3.9, and we knew the 12 was probably high. So so what we're starting off with in this conversation today is an overall increase to the health plan, medical, and pharmacy of a needed 7.9% increase. At that point, we did meet with the insurance team and then also the committee to look at ways to reduce that 7.9%. Areas would be potentially offering maybe a smaller network. So it may be a network for Rutherford County that might just include St. Thomas and or Stonecrest. So a smaller network, driving people to higher quality, lower cost facilities and doctors. We looked at plan design changes just as a benchmark. If we decided to raise all the deductibles, for example, of the 3 plans by $500, so a $500 deductible increase, that represented about a 1.5% reduction we could apply to the claims. If we raised it all the way up to an additional $1,000 deductible on top of what it is today, that was worth about 2.5%. The decisions were made in the previous committee and also with Mr. Elam's team that due to the current state, a narrow network, especially with changing the on-site clinic upcoming, may have not been the best decision. Changing deductibles and passing more of that inpatient, outpatient cost on to the employees at the time of service didn't seem the best at this time. But one thing we did land on is similar to last year. If you guys remember last year, we made a pharmacy change. We are still seeing that the pharmacy costs are continuing to increase. And that's consistent with a lot of our clients with more specialty pharmacies, pharma included there. So last year, if you remember, we put in a 90-day fill with Walgreens that helped reduce the cost a little bit. One of the suggestions we recommended also in talking with Cigna is changing the formulary to their value PDL formulary, which essentially affects about 10% of the population. So it was about, I think, 1,300 members out of almost 13,000 members that would be affected by this formulary change, meaning there were 3 tiers. One tier would say, if you are taking, for example, this proton pump inhibitor, for you may have to go, instead of taking it through the plan, you may have to go over the counter at the pharmacy, which means they would pay that out of their pocket at the pharmacy, but it wouldn't flow through the plan. Another option would be a prescription that's in that middle tier category would be raised up to the third tier. So they'd be paying more out of their pocket for that prescription. But in general, that affects about 10% of the population. It's moving them to paying more of that cost or making them potentially to make different decisions with their pharmacy. And it was able to reduce the claims projection, for example, in the moderate from 7.9 down to a flat 7% increase. So the recommendation in the prior committee was to go with the moderate at 7.9, implement the pharmacy formulary change to get it down to 7. And then this also included our stop loss. So we have stop loss protection for our catastrophic claims. Cigna was able to give us an extension on that. So we are looking to move from a 7/1 effective date for our contract with Cigna to a 1/1 contract, a January contract, which is consistent with all of our other carriers, and also with our open enrollment each year. So the stop loss contract would move to January, and they were able to give us an 18-month rate. So from 7/1 now through the end of next year at a 5% increase at the same level that we have today. And that's included in this proposed 7% increase. So maybe I'll stop right there, because the next thing that I'll get into is how we distribute the 7% amongst the 3 plans, the HRA, the deductible, the copay, and then also how we distribute those dollars between what the employer pays or the schools pay versus the employee, because I do have a couple options to consider there. But there are any questions on the claims, how they're trending, the COVID analysis, the plan design recommendation? So I'll open that up maybe for discussion, if that's okay.
What option was actually voted in by the committee?
Voted in by the committee, so they did vote to go with the formulary change. They voted to go with the moderate at the 7%. And then the next part of that was the contribution. So today, for example, under the HRA plan, which is the majority of the population, the contributions is 100% paid for from the county for the employees. It's 95% for the employee plus spouse, 96% for child, and then 94% for the full family. So that's the way it is today, is the HRA has that. What we had suggested to continue to pass some additional costs on to the employees is another option, which is what we're calling option 2, where 95% is paid for by the county instead of 100% for employee, and then a flat 90% for the other 3 tiers. And essentially what that does is the 7% needed increase represents about $5 million overall. At the current contribution structure, it represents about $4 million to the county or the schools and $1 million to the employees. By changing just the HRA to the 95/90, the contribution shifts to almost around a 50-50 share between the employees and the employer. So it reduces it to 2.4 for the employer and 2.6 for the employees.
Okay.
And that was what was voted in the previous committee. We did have a third option that you guys have. You have 3 different exhibits that are provided. The third option was actually, well, no, that's not true.
No,
the third option was
the third option was actually voted in. The option 1 and 2 is what was presented to the committee, and then this was the change. The third option is what they changed, which is everything's the same except for the HRA plan.
Right. Well, the third option was a hybrid of, it was a 95, everybody was pretty comfortable with the 95% shift for the employees, and it's 93, a flat 93 for the other 3 tiers, which passes a little more cost on to the employer, about an additional, I believe it was $700,000. So it's 3.1 for the employer then, and then 1.9 to the employees. with the goal of next year, the following year after that, for the 2022, we would go to the 95.90. So that was what was recommended by the previous. Now, in addition to that, there were things that were already in place. When we, I guess 4 or 5 years ago, there was an incremental change to the deductible and the copay plan, and we're in the last year of that contribution exhibit. So, for example, the deductible plan had an 81% employer contribution for employee, 80 for everybody else. That is also changing to 80 for all lines. And then the copay plan was 90 for employee and 81 for everyone else. That is going to 80. So there is already a change to the deductible and the copay that was already voted on in the past. To Mr. Elam's point, what we're referring to now is the fact that the HRA plan has been the same contribution strategy for essentially the last 10 years without a change. And so some form of an adjustment there to honestly try to offset some of the potential losses the county and the schools may see due to the current state. So the recommendation was to go, as Mr. Elam said, with the option 3 in the previous, with also the recommendation that we would present all 3 options to this committee for you guys to ask questions and vote on as well.
Who was that, Commissioner Allen?
I have a comment.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so it was voted on at insurance, but it was not unanimous. The vote was 8-5 to advance that third option. And I will tell you, all 3 of the county commissioners did not vote in favor of it. I won't speak for the other 2, for Mac and Jeff Phillips, but I know personally I was more in favor of a 50-50 split on this increase, as opposed to continuing to shift more to the county. And so, you know, my rationale behind that really is, and I said this the other day, this is going to be the first of many, many hard decisions that we're going to have to make going forward. And so in my mind, a 50-50 split is still generous. We're still paying more on that plan than we are for the other ones that, like Jay just mentioned. So I just want to express to you that I did not vote in favor of option 3, as neither did the other 2 commissioners on that committee.
The other 2 commissioners, what is that, McAdoo and Phillips, is that correct?
That's correct.
Well, folks,
The only other thing I would add on there is just part of the motion is the dental and the vision is also provided in the rate sheets. We were able to negotiate no increase for dental and vision. So just when we package this together at a vote at some point, it would be the medical, dental, vision, the medical, as we've been discussing, between options 1, 2, and 3, and then the dental with no increase for either line of coverage.
Commissioner Allen, and you said you had a preference. What was your preference on those options?
It's option 2.
Option 2, okay.
It's the one that takes that increase and it's more of a 50-50 split, as opposed to the 2% to the employee and 3% to the county.
I had a call prior to the meeting from Mr. Doug Beaudry, who's the finance director for the schools. Doug, are you online with us?
Yes, sir, I am.
Would you like to make a comment?
I was on the insurance committee as well, and like Miss Allen said, you know, I understand the times, and it's just whatever the will of the budget committee is. Just want to make you aware, just as the insurance department's already reviewed with you the cost difference between the third option that was forwarded by the insurance committee and the option 2 that Ms. Allen's speaking about. That's going to be $573,627 difference more on the county school budget for this next year. So we're looking over $500,000 difference between those 2 options. And you know, I understand you're the you're the budget committee, you make the decision. I just want you to know that's additional funding that's going to be needed for the school side as well, being that we've got the majority of the employees on this county plan. That was my concern.
So did everybody catch that? There's actually, the option that was voted in, there'll be an increase above what they've actually accounted for in the school's budget. So there would be an increase of how much, Doug?
It's, Mr. Petey, you want me to repeat that number?
Yeah, I didn't catch all of that number.
It is just over $573,000 additional dollars for the option 3 plan instead of the option 2 that the insurance department's talking about with the 95.90 for the HRA contribution.
In the option 2, Commissioner Allen, that's the one that you advocated for.
Yes, sir. The swing in the change of these two plans is basically $700,000. So either the county's picking up that $700,000 or we're shifting that additional $700,000 back into employee premiums. And so that's part of the number that Mr. Bodery is describing, is that of that $700,000, over $500,000 of it is going to be in the school board's budget because they're the ones who have the employees. So it's county dollars either way you slice it. And so in my mind, like I said initially, the more equitable thing to do is to just split that down the middle 50-50. Because, and with only a 7% increase anyway, I know in the private market, if you can have see anything less than a 10% increase, that's a gift. So these are still not unreasonable rates. And, folks have, multiple options to choose through this plan. Ed's, their group is really good about working with folks and trying to counsel them on the best plan for them. I would love to say that we could just, slide this right through. And honestly, in different times we might, but we have no idea what the days are that lie ahead. And so knowing what I know right this minute today, I feel like we need to be as conservative as possible. And I see that as being option 2.
Okay. Mayor, you also sit on that committee. You have any comments you'd like to make?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. This can't come at the worst time, but we have been blessed in Rutherford County for many, many years to have a very, what they consider or call a very rich benefit plan. And our employees have been the recipient of that rich plan. If you compare us to the private sector today, large companies, medium-sized companies continue to require the employees to share more of the cost. And I think whether we go with Plan 2 or Plan 3, I think the vote the other day was kind of even, almost even, but I think that everybody on the insurance committee realizes that there has to be some changes made, and more of that burden is going to have to be shared back to the employee. We hate that. Can't come at the worst time when unemployment's down, but I think even those employees who sit on the insurance committee realize that at least they have a job, and whatever we can do here from the county commission's perspective to maintain jobs and benefits of some sort, they're willing to support. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. Lisa, quick question for you. Do we need to split this up, or we can vote on this as a whole?
I think we can vote on it as a whole. That was what the motion was last year. We took everything, including the long-term, short-term disability last year was included.
Okay. Lisa, if you got something to add?
No, I agree with Mark.
Mark, I forget that you're here beside me, even though you're not, so I appreciate your help. All of you. This is a little more difficult than what we're used to dealing with, or at least for me it is, and I appreciate all of your help. You've heard the discussion. This is an important decision. we have to make every few years on our employees' insurance. Do I hear any more questions, or do I hear a recommendation?
I do have one question for Jay. It's basically the stop loss policy he said was going to move to January. Would that be the item we're voting on would go from 7 of 20 through December of 21?
It's actually 7 of 20 through December of 21. Yep, that's right.
Okay.
Yep.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions? If not, I'll entertain a motion.
I'd like to make a motion, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to move that we adopt the medical option 2 and the rates as stated in the attachments with it's virtually no price change in the dental and vision, and then also going to the 18-month stop loss.
Mark, did you get all that? I couldn't hear everything she said, or you can repeat it.
Chairman P.,
I did get that. We also need to consider the plan change.
the pharmacy.
Yeah.
I have a prepared recommendation if you want me to read it. And, you know, if
Is it got to do with her motion?
yes, it has to do with her motion. If
Commissioner Allen, if that's all right with you, I'll have Ed read this, and if you concur with this motion, let me know if your motion will stand.
would you
Please.
object, Commissioner Allen?
No, clean it up for me,
Okay.
Ed.
The recommendation would be, and you said option 2, correct?
Correct.
Okay. The recommendation would be to renew the Cigna individual $750,000 stop loss with a 5% increase for the next 18 months, which will put us on a January to December calendar to expire December 31st, 2021, to adopt Cigna's formulary value preferred drug list, to also adopt to approve the dental and vision rates as presented in the exhibits showing no premium increase for 2021, and to adopt option 2 as presented in the exhibits.
So moved.
Jay, does that cover everything?
Well, just like you guys are struggling, Jake is texting me that the that the contract I said is not exactly right. It's a 12-month at the 5%, or correct me, Jake, you're on 2, and then a 6-month extension at no increase. So it's 18 months at 5, but the way they worded it is a 12-month at 5 and then a 6-month at 0. Is that correct, Jake?
Yeah, so technically it's a 6-month short contract year that'll get you from 7/1 of 2020 through 12/31 of 2020, and then it'll be a 12-month contract from 1/1/2021 through 12/31/2021. But Mr. Elam is correct. The rate that we lock in today will be the rate all the way until the end of 2021. Just a point of clarification.
Mr. Allen, does your motion still stand then, in agreement with?
Exactly my motion as Ed read it.
Okay. I have a motion to accept actually what Mr. Elam read. Do I see a second?
I'll second that motion.
Was that Commissioner Stevens?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you. So we have a motion and a second. Do I hear any discussion or further questions? Mr. Piercy.
Is this an issue that has to be taken care of this month?
Yes, I think we do. We've got a timeline to meet, and, you know, the old agreement will lapse.
I'm just a little uneasy voting on something like this with such little information that I have on it. It seems very important, going to affect a lot of people, and this is the first I've heard of it because I don't sit on the insurance committee and haven't heard anything about it. That's the reason I was asking.
And I understand your concerns, and I have the same concerns. That's why I asked for Commissioner Allen's input, and I also look at the other commissioners that sit on that committee to see, you know, their opinions on that, because they're taking time Commissioner Johnson?
Yes, I'd like to ask one question. Mr. Elam?
Yes, sir.
Basically, the recommendation and the motion that's been made, was that palatable with the insurance committee meeting? How did that come out from the insurance committee?
Yeah, the recommendation that I put here is what came from the insurance committee. The only change that's in that is it went from option 3 to option 2. That's what Commissioner Allen asked for.
Thank you.
Is there any other discussion?
Mr. Chairman, this is Robert Stevens. I'd like to make a comment. Commissioner Piercy brought up a great question, and I asked Ms. Nolan that same question this afternoon about whether we had to actually vote on this tonight, and she said that we do. And the reason for that is that we have to have some kind of placeholder or some kind of number to prepare all of our budget. This is a huge expense, and there has to be a starting place somewhere for the budget to be prepared. But she also said that in a month or two, we can go back and readdress this if we have extra money or things turn out better than it appears that they are now. So I'm comfortable with moving forward with this as a starting place, just so that the budget can be prepared and presented for all the departments. But if this crisis turns around quickly and our revenues pick back up, we can always go back and look at this and readdress it if that happens. So I'm comfortable moving forward with this, though.
Thank you, Commissioner Stevens. Any other comments? Hearing none, please call roll.
Commissioner Allen?
Yes.
Commissioner Dodd?
Yes.
Commissioner Gooch?
Yes.
Commissioner Johnson?
Yes.
Commissioner Piercy?
Yes.
Commissioner Stevens?
Yes.
Mr. P?
Yes. Okay, the motion carries. Thank you, Mr. Elam.
Thank you.
Okay. The rest of our meeting is going to be the Lisa show. So most of our departments are not here in person. And Lisa has agreed to cover for these folks. So Lisa, go ahead, please.
Okay, so this one is for the Sheriff's Department. They have 3 amendments, and I'll go through all 3 if that's acceptable to y'all. The first one is moving money from their gasoline account to their custodial supplies of $22,000. The next one is a grant, is to recognize revenue from the 2020 AAA Tennessee Traffic Safety Grant. That would be $1,000 that will go to their restricted account that they will not spend until the next fiscal year. $1,500 is the contribution, and then $500 is what they intend to spend for the current year. The last amendment is a request to move $10,000 from their maintenance and repair equipment in the sheriff's budget to the jail budget for transport of $10,000.
Okay. You've
Lisa,
heard the-
there's also the amendment for the AAA grant.
I did that one.
Okay, I'm sorry.
That was
I
number
missed that.
2.
Okay, you've heard the request for 3 transfers. Do I hear any other discussion or questions? Hearing none, I'll entertain a motion.
These came out of public safety, okay, didn't they, Commissioner P?
They did. I don't recall the middle one. She was requesting some grants, which we gave approval for her to apply. I think some of those grants have since come to have come due, so I think that's why we're voting on this transfer. But yes, what she asked for out of public safety passed.
Motion to approve.
Thank you, Commissioner Johnson. We have a motion to approve the transfers. Do I hear a second? Commissioner Gooch, seconds. Any other discussion? Hearing none, please call roll, Mark.
Commissioner Allen?
Yes.
Commissioner Dodd?
Yes.
Commissioner Gooch?
Yes.
Commissioner Johnson?
Yes.
Commissioner Piercy?
Yes.
Commissioner Stevens?
Yes.
Commissioner P?
Yes, motion carries. Thank you, Lisa.
The next is a request from the Sheriff's Department to apply for a grant from the Tennessee Mental Health department to help fund these transporting these patients. Not patients, inmates.
Okay. But this is part of the mental health grant. Okay.
Mental health transport program. And this is a request to apply.
Got a request to apply for a mental health grant. Is that matching funds or?
It looks like there's a FAQ that's provided for you, and that very first question talks about how they come up with the amount. And it looks like they're going to come up with a dollar amount per transport.
Lisa, that's there's $3.9 million that's been allocated statewide, and depending on how many departments apply for the grant, then it will just be divided out over those number of departments and those number of transports.
You know if there's matching funds, Mark?
No, there is not.
Okay. So we're asking for permission to apply for a grant. Hear any discussion or motion?
Have we ever had this grant before? Or no. Okay, motion to approve.
Gooch?
Second.
Second. Commissioner Johnson? Mr. Piercy tried, but he didn't quite make it, so. Okay, any other discussion? Hearing none, Mark, call roll, please.
Commissioner Allen?
Aye.
Commissioner Dodd?
Yes.
Commissioner Gooch?
Yes.
Commissioner Johnson?
Yes.
Commissioner Piercy?
Yes.
Commissioner Stevens?
Yes.
Commissioner P?
Yes, and motion carries. Okay, next, Lisa.
The next one has to do with PAWS. The first one is an amendment to recognize the Petco Foundation grant and to appropriate $19,500 for waiving the fees on Fridays. It's the Petco Foundation Free for All Fridays. Increase to line 302, advertising $1,500, increase $7,000 for drugs and medical supplies, and $2,000 for other supplies and materials. The next, these are transfers, is requesting to increase custodial supplies, taking it from their lease payments, or the estimate that they had for operating lease payments, $1,000 to increase office supplies, reducing their advertising by $1,000, and to increase maintenance agreements for $1,000 by reducing their data processing equipment by $1,000. These last three are cleanup amendments to help get them through the end of the fiscal year.
Is that all of them, Lisa?
Yes, sir.
For the request, and this also came through public safety and was agreed to. Any questions? If not, I'll entertain a motion.
I'll move for approval, Mr. Chair.
Gooch moves for approval. Do I hear a second?
Second.
Commissioner Dodd seconds. Any other discussion? Hearing none, call roll, Mark.
Commissioner Allen?
Yes.
Commissioner Dodd?
Yes.
Commissioner Gooch?
Yes.
Commissioner Johnson?
Yes.
Commissioner Piercy?
Yes.
Commissioner Stevens?
Yes.
Commissioner P?
Yes. Thank you.
Chair, if I could ask a question about PAWS, can anyone comment, are the operations down there normal, or have they been adjusted for this crisis that we're in, or?
Call on the mayor to answer that, please.
Matter of fact, when I talked to Michael this morning, he said he only had 7 animals left in the facility. He had never seen it that way. And I saw a thing on Fox News earlier today, and they said animal shelters in places like that all across the country were just, people were feeling sorry for the animals, and the adoptions, they can't keep enough animals. I mean, everybody's adopting all the animals. And when I drove by there Saturday, going to Sam's to find some toilet paper, like everybody else, there was tons of food stacked up outside the door. People had just dropped by and left food. And so, and we are getting a new roof on. They're about 2/3 way through getting a new roof on out there. So everything's in good order.
So business is kind of usual with people, the public able to come in and adopt animals?
Yeah, it's actually slow because there's not enough animals. Usually it's jam-packed, and so there's less work for the kennel attendants to clean out kennels and feed and everything else.
They can go up to Coffee County and get some.
They need them up there.
Big business.
Okay.
Walgreens.
Any other discussion? You're none. Lisa, if you want to go ahead with this item 10, Circuit Court.
Yes, okay, so Ms. Harrell is requesting a transfer, well, not a transfer, it's an amendment, $2,400 out of her restricted account to pay for online credit card services.
This is where people can get their plates and use no, that's Melissa Harrell, excuse me. But where people are using credit card services. Any questions? Not, I'll entertain a motion.
Motion to approve.
Johnson makes a motion. Commissioner Dodd seconds it. Any further discussion?
Excuse me, I made the motion.
Commissioner-
I made the motion.
Oh, I'm sorry. Commissioner Dodd made the motion. I'm sorry. Trying to watch these screens, it's kind of hard to catch who's doing that, so thank you. Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none, Mark, call roll.
Commissioner Allen?
Yes.
Commissioner Dodd?
Yes.
Commissioner Gooch?
Yes.
Commissioner Johnson?
Yes.
Commissioner Piercy?
Yes.
Commissioner Stevens?
Yes.
Commissioner P?
Yes, and motion carries. Item 11, the Ambulance Service Fund.
Okay. All right, they're requesting transfers from a line 707 building improvements to maintenance and repair of buildings of $10,000. It said that she said they've made several repairs to their stations and are projecting to go over their original budget. They're requesting transfers from communication equipment into gasoline and their assessment and penalties. So they never know about their gasoline prices, and they're projecting to go over their original budget amount. They're also requesting to transfer funds from, let me get this off, 321, engineering services. Engineering services, let me get my, to their 530 line. The 530 line item is to pay TennCare the assessment fees. They collect more from TennCare than they pay and are projected to be over their original budget. They received a check from St. Thomas Hospital for the paramedic scholarship program, and they're requesting to move those funds into line 524. That's the $7,000 transfer. And they received checks from Schwann Cosmetics for $150 and Dr. Russ Galloway for $1,200 for EMS work, and they're requesting to move that into their $499 donations. So $1,350 to donations, $7,000 from contributions to staff development, and then communication equipment and engineering services going to gasoline, and assessments decrease their building improvements to maintenance and repair for $10,000.
Okay. Got a quick question. The gasoline account, does that account take in gasoline and diesel? Okay, that answers my question then, because, you know, it's odd that our gas prices are spiraling down and then we're asking for increases, but evidently our diesel fuel is not dropping like the gasoline has been. So that's the reason for the increase. I don't know if it'd be a good idea to split those in the future or not, but I guess even somebody like me can kind of figure out what's going on.
Yeah.
We're all right. Any other questions? Not, I'll entertain a motion.
This is basically changing money around. It's no new money anywhere.
I believe that's correct, yes.
Okay, make a motion to approve.
Commissioner Johnson makes a motion to approve.
Second.
Commissioner Dodd seconds. Any further discussion? Hearing none, call roll, Mark.
Commissioner Allen?
Yes.
Commissioner Dodd?
Yes.
Commissioner Gooch?
Yes.
Commissioner Johnson?
Yes.
Commissioner Piercy,
Yes.
Commissioner Stevens,
Yes.
Commissioner P.
Yes, motion carries. Okay, Lisa?
The next one is for fire rescue, and it is requesting to move 10,000 from our pooled gasoline count into their diesel fuel. 10,000.
Already answered my question on that one, so. Are there any other questions on this diesel fuel request? Not, I'll entertain a motion.
Motion to approve.
Commissioner Johnson makes a motion to approve. By the way, you guys at home can also make a motion. I'll hear you. Commissioner Gooch seconds it. So we have a motion and a second. Any other discussion? Hearing none, call roll.
Commissioner Allen?
Yes.
Commissioner Dodd?
Yes.
Commissioner Gooch?
Yes.
Commissioner Gooch? Commissioner Johnson?
Yes.
Commissioner Piercy?
Yes.
Commissioner Stevens?
Yes.
Commissioner P.
Yes, motion carries. Thank you.
The next item is a request from the Rural Fire Department to apply for a FEMA assistant grant, the AFG 2020 grant. The amount of the grant is $459,300, with the federal portion being $417,545, local portion, if awarded, $41,754.55. They are asking to purchase 25 sets of turnout gear and 27 self-containing breathing apparatuses.
Okay, you've heard the request and the amount. Do I have any other questions? Our cost would be $41,754 if we receive the total amount of the grant, which is $459,300. Just to kind of give you an idea, turnout gear I think is about $2,000 now, and Chris, you can nod. Yeah, it's higher. Okay. 25, 3,500. So one set of turnout gear is about $3,500 to equip our personnel just so they can do this job. That's including our volunteers. So we're talking at 7,500 times what you said, 35? Yeah. 3,500. So I think that's a pretty good deal. We're barely throwing in enough to get maybe one pair of turnouts and a set of boots versus getting 75 sets. So do I hear a motion or any discussion?
Motion to approve.
Commissioner Piercy moves to approve. Commissioner Dodge seconds. Any other discussion? Hearing none, call roll, please.
Commissioner Allen?
Yes.
Commissioner Dodd?
Yes.
Commissioner Gooch?
Yes.
Commissioner Johnson?
Yes.
Commissioner Piercy?
Yes.
Commissioner Stevens?
Yes.
Commissioner P.
Yes, motion carries.
Next amendment is for juvenile detention, and it's our typical one for the, getting toward the end of the year, is requesting additional funds for overtime, $15,000, and taking it out of the lines where there may have been vacancies during the year, $10,000 from sergeants and $5,000 from attendants.
Heard the request. Are there any questions? This is something we normally see where our personnel, where we've had people that are positions that aren't full and we're having to cover them. That's why that overtime is in there, and luckily we have the money to pay it, so this is coming out of their budget.
So moved.
Commissioner Dodd makes a motion to approve.
Second.
Commissioner Stevens seconds. Okay. Any other discussion? Hearing none, call roll, please.
Commissioner Allen?
Yes.
Commissioner Dodd?
Yes.
Commissioner Gooch?
Yes.
Commissioner Johnson?
Yes.
Commissioner Piercy?
Yes.
Commissioner Stevens?
Yes.
Commissioner P.
Yes, motion carries. Okay, number 15, General Purpose School Fund.
I'm assuming that Doug is going to handle those.
Doug, you here?
Yes,
There
sir,
he
I
is.
am.
Okay. you're up then.
Okay, just want to premise this with neither of these two budget amendments are asking for additional revenue that's not already been, approved. The first one, I'll start with the first one. It's a non-payroll budget amendment within major expenditure functions in the 141 fund. This was, we did this and put it before the school board last month. It's a routine cleanup, non-payroll budget amendment within major functions to true up funds within departments in order to assist as we've been going into the next fiscal year budget preparation. It was also, I did this to allow the department heads to get a bit more accurate picture of where they were on their current year budgets, so they would not overspend anything, unless, of course, something that was out of their control, like, if we needed something for special education or whatnot. Some of the things in here that you see is coordinated school health. They have a walking track grant expenditure. The attendance office, we switched over, as recommended by the state, to a new attendance software. It's Skyward, which most of the county systems in Tennessee have. There was some additional software expense for that. Transportation department, they have the Edgilog and the new bus camera system that they've been installing on the contract buses. And then we utilized, if there wasn't funds within those major categories to make those, to cover, once again, this is all non-payroll related budget amendments. If there was not additional funds there within the major category, we offset the object code overages with additional lease revenue received from the Head Start program at John Coleman. And of course, the coordinated school health, those additional expenditures were covered by additional funding from grant funds that coordinated school health received. Recommended motion is, of course, to approve the cleanup non-payroll within major expenditure functions budget amendment for 141.
Doug, to summarize that, is this basically just a accounting cleanup for the end of the year, or there's evidently no additional expenses that I'm seeing?
That's correct, sir. I did this so, like I said, so as we're going into this budget cycle, which we're now in, I just wanted to clean up the department budgets just so I could have a more accurate view of where we were at by department over here at the schools, and also to allow the department heads to see, exactly where they were at with their current year budgets.
Okay. And you've got a second item here. I'm going to ask the committee, do y'all want to take these together? Together is a consensus. Okay. Doug, please continue.
The second budget amendment in front of you is a similar one. It's a non-payroll budget amendment to move funds between two major expenditure functions for CTE and to move restricted funds out of fund balance in the general purpose school fund. I separated this to a second budget cleanup amendment because, of course, that's going between two major functions. So, it would go forward, wouldn't be on the consent agenda typically, unless it's the will of the budget committee when it goes to the full commission. This non-payroll budget amendment is just an additional non-payroll cleanup to move donated funds from United Way, Jennings Jones Foundation, Smyrna Rotary Club to budget for expenditure of funds as requested and directed by the donors at Smyrna West Alternative School for staff development, needy children clothing, and teacher recognition. There was grants donated to the district-wide Spectrum program for gifted program staff development, and a district-wide clothing a donation for needy children of school age that's administered through our attendance office. With the movement of funds between the two major expenditure functions, as well as out of fund balance, which I want to, of course, remind you, this is not unassigned fund balance. This is restricted funds that were donated before June 30th of last fiscal year that we're now bringing up into an expenditure column so we can expend it for what the donors requested it to be spent on. Recommended motion is to approve the non-payroll budget amendment as presented.
Mr. Chairman, I'll make that motion. It came through Health and Ed unanimously.
Did I hear you say that you would also make that motion?
Yes, sir. I said I made the motion and it came through Health and Ed unanimously.
Okay, thank you, Chairman Allen. Ms. Allen made a motion to approve. Do I hear a second? Yes, you do. Commissioner Dodd seconds. Is there any other discussion?
Doug, this is Mark. You said it's not out of unassigned fund balance?
It shows that it's out of unassigned fund balance, but I see what you're saying on the 39, but it is because we did not actually restrict it at the end of the year, but that is anything that's coming out of that unassigned, it says unassigned fund balance is actually those restricted donations and grants from last fiscal year that we did not reserve at June 30th. But to the dollar, that's those funds. Thank you, Martha.
Mr. Chairman. So basically, this is changing money around too?
That's my understanding.
This is not money coming out the ending fund balance?
No, sir, it's not. It's coming out of fund balance, but it's restricted funds.
Okay. It's no new money, correct?
That's correct.
Okay.
So we have a motion and a second. Do I hear any other discussion? Hearing none, Mark, call roll.
Commissioner Allen?
Yes.
Commissioner Dodd?
Yes.
Commissioner Gooch?
Yes.
Commissioner Johnson?
Yes.
Commissioner Piercy?
Yes.
Commissioner Stevens?
Yes.
Commissioner P?
Yes, motion carries. Thank you. Lisa, now on to the highway fund.
Okay. All right, so the Highway Fund has a budget amendment, and it is primarily because they've got 3 people who are intending to retire, and this amendment is to provide funds in their salary line items to pay accrued benefits. The total cost is $20,880 coming from their SALT line, going into the various line items. $62,000 function of $7,100, and then in laborers, $2,305, and the related benefits. That total to $20,880.
Okay, you've heard the request. Mr. Johnson, you got any additional comments since you're on that committee?
I would make a motion to approve. I made the motion at the road board, and it passed unanimously.
Thank you, Mr. Johnson. Commissioner Johnson. Do I hear a second?
Second.
Commissioner Piercy seconds the motion. Any further discussion? Hearing none, call roll.
Commissioner Allen?
Yes.
Commissioner Dodd?
Yes.
Commissioner Gooch?
Yes.
Commissioner Johnson?
Yes.
Commissioner Piercy?
Yes.
Commissioner Stevens?
Yes.
Commissioner P?
Yes, motion carries. Okay.
Next one is a Homeland Security grant acceptance and the related budget amendment. This is for the 2019 Homeland Security Grant Program for $201,481.
This is that repeat program we see year to year. So,
Go to page, let's see, 20 of here. It kind of gives the budget, tells you what it can be spent for. Go to page 20. It says, funding of training, exercises, planning, and equipment purchases allowable under the fiscal year 2019 Homeland Security Grant Program.
any questions? Hearing none, I'll entertain a motion.
Motion to approve.
Commissioner Johnson, motion. Do I hear a second? Commissioner Dodd, seconds. Any other discussion? Hearing none, call roll, please.
Commissioner Allen?
Yes.
Commissioner Dodd?
Yes.
Commissioner Gooch?
Yes.
Commissioner Johnson?
Yes.
Commissioner Piercy?
Yes.
Commissioner Stevens?
Yes.
Commissioner P?
Yes, motion carries. Okay, on to EMA budget.
The first one has to do with a salary supplement to pay an individual while he served as interim. That's $520 coming out of the supervisor directory line, so there was funds within the budget to pay for that. The second amendment has to do with all the COVID-19 expenses that the mayor alluded to or he spoke about in the beginning, and we are requesting $100,000 for other charges in account 599, other charges dash CO19. We're trying to accumulate all those expenses under this cost center. And then also asking for $100,000 in health equipment for a total of $200,000 under unassigned fund balance.
The 200.
200,000.
520. 200,520.
Total, no, the 520 is within. There's money within, so we're just asking for the
Okay.
200 total out of unassigned. And, when I prepared this amendment, I did it as of April. So I will tell you, as of today, what has been spent or encumbered out of the 599 other charges is $74,299.88. And under the health equipment, between what has been paid and encumbered is $79,410. So,
Lisa, if you don't mind, she and I had this discussion, and actually I called and also told her news media that I made this call, not soliciting votes, but to give information. During the current emergency that we have, the mayor does have the power to spend in an emergency situation, and like I said, I had called the members to try to let you know as I found out some of those changes. And part of the $74,000, I believe you said, was for the masks that we purchased, also for purchasing the refrigerated trucks that we'll have to use. And there's also in that equipment line that wasn't mentioned this, and we talked about that a little earlier, or maybe it was Lisa and I, is the decontamination units that are going in to clean up the ambulances as they're used. So from trip to trip, you don't get any kind of cross-contamination from one patient to another. So that's part of that $74,000.
also, it's a lot of money, and we're spending, we're just making the effort to try to accumulate all those expenses, because we will turn around and request reimbursement from FEMA/TEMA, hoping to get 75% reimbursed.
Mayor.
Director Clark is here. I think that you all have already contacted TEMA, and all these items are reimbursable. Am I correct? Yes, sir. Thank you.
So on top of this, on those emergency purchases, other departments have made specific expenses out of their existing lines. And again, we're trying to accumulate all those. And so today, when I ran this, in the general fund to date, and it's including those expenses that we talked about, spent and encumbered, it totals $162,631 in the general fund. Solid waste has got $1,000. And then ambulance, they've got $4,723. We've asked the departments to go back and see if there's anything that, we've coded this way, if there's anything that has not been coded to this cost center. I've asked them to go back and start pulling that information for us.
I've got a question since you brought that up. When we're actually moving a COVID patient, would the time be considered something we could charge?
That's, to me, doing their job. That's part of their job. I mean, if overtime and those things are allowable, but I think it's really overtime over above what they would normally do.
Okay, just out of curiosity there. Any other questions? Mr. Johnson?
No, sir. This is actually a proactive move to take care of a situation. Motion to approve.
I have a motion to approve by Commissioner Johnson. Do I hear a second?
Second.
Commissioner Piercy seconds the motion. Any other discussion? Hearing none, call roll, please.
Commissioner Allen,
Yes.
Commissioner Dodd,
Yes.
Commissioner Gooch,
Yes.
Commissioner Johnson,
Yes.
Commissioner Piercy,
Yes.
Commissioner Stevens,
Yes.
Commissioner P.
Yes. Motion carries. Okay, Lisa.
Okay, the next one is an application, a request to apply for the U.S. Department of Justice Coronavirus Emergency Supplemental Funding, and Rutherford County has been allocated $50,723. I'm not sure what we'll spend that for, but we want to start getting in the pipeline, and it's allocated to us, so we want to claim it.
Do we need a motion to accept that money?
We need to approve our application.
Okay, so we'll be approving the application. We know the money's already there and doesn't cost us anything.
Right, right.
Do I hear a motion?
So moved.
Didn't catch who that was.
So moved.
Commissioner Dodd, okay. I hear a second. Okay, Commissioner Gooch, thank you. Any other discussion? Hearing none, call roll.
Commissioner Allen,
Yes.
Commissioner Dodd,
Yes.
Commissioner Gooch,
Yes.
Commissioner Johnson,
Yes.
Commissioner Piercy,
Yes.
Commissioner Stevens,
Yes.
Commissioner P.
Yes, motion carries. Okay, the next is county mayors.
This amendment is in the county mayor's budgets for $5,000. It's within his budget, moving $5,000 from other charges to dues and memberships, and it is for the Rutherford County to pay dues to GNRC for the mayor's caucus. Just from history, the caucus was formed in 2009 to provide leadership on important issues facing a rapidly changing regional landscape. Transportation, and particularly the pursuit of modern regional transit system, served as the early catalyst, but in the brief history, the caucus has served as an effective forum for building working relationships among the mayors and has helped local governments support each other on issues ranging from flood recovery to state and federal legislative and policy priorities. The caucus has grown into an effective forum to discuss issues that cross political boundaries, identify shared opportunities and challenges, and develop collaborative strategies for action among mayors and county executives.
Do I hear any questions? Mayor, would you like to make a comment?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. I became, when I first got elected, I started getting notices to attend, and Vicki Taylor told me I was supposed to pick up where Mayor Burgess left off. So we attend every month. It's actually organized through GNRC. There are about 21 mayors in the Middle Tennessee area, and of course we meet with our state leaders, et cetera. We exchange ideas back and forth and help each other out, just like we did when the nursing home over in Gallatin just recently had the infection of COVID-19 in that nursing home. We sent our bus, our EMS has a bus and 2 ambulances over there to help evacuate those. So it's an exchange between the different governments of ideas as well as equipment, and kind of a mutual aid type thing. I didn't realize that we hadn't paid our dues, and Michael Skipper sent us a letter said we hadn't paid our dues, and I didn't know. So we've got to transfer some money and pay our dues.
Okay, any further questions or comments? Hearing none, I'll entertain a motion.
Motion to approve.
Motion to approve, Commissioner Johnson.
Second.
Commissioner Dodd seconds. Any other discussion? Hearing none, Mark, call roll.
Commissioner Allen,
Yes.
Commissioner Dodd,
Yes.
Commissioner Gooch,
Yes.
Commissioner Johnson,
Yes.
Commissioner Piercy,
Yes.
Commissioner Stevens,
Yes.
Commissioner P.
Yes, motion carries. So we can get caught up on our dues now. Okay, Lisa.
Right, okay, so the next one is the one that Commissioner Stevens had asked for us to come to this committee to talk about before we prepare our budget, and this is our TCRS contribution rate for 2021. The rate came back the same as last year at 8.42%. But previous to this year, we were contributing 10.66 above, or 10.66, that is above the rate that the actuarially determined contribution. So we pay ahead, but the rate has stayed the same. So my recommendation is to continue the same rate at 10.16 that, for us to build our budget on for next year. Now, I provided you with the whole document, so you saw all the information that they gave us. One of the reasons why I say that we ought to still pay above is that this valuation date was as of June 30th, 2019. And if you remember our 2019-20 year, we gave significant raises. Those raises would have not been factored into this. So I feel like we need to still pay ahead so that when those additional valuations are done on the rates, on the current salaries that we have, that we still stay the same. We are consistent in what we're paying, and we are consistent in what our actuary determined contribution rate is. I feel like if we do not keep those rates up, that those bottom rates will swing. At least we are keeping consistent. That's my recommendation.
We evaluate this on a yearly basis normally.
Well, typically when they first started doing this yearly one, and you saw the letter, it's the letters that say, you need to put more in because of two things. One is the investment rate of return of our monies that's in the fund, that they were reducing it down. So if you reduce the amount that you expect to return on the monies you have, then you're going to ultimately have to pay more. The other thing is, when they're doing these calculations, is how long do people live? And so they are moving it from 65 and moving the mortality ages longer, which is more what is really happening because people are living longer. So as they do that, that puts pressure on our rate. So keeping it at that high kind of helps us offset those changes and keeps us from having those swings. I will say that we started in the 14-15 year. At the time, they were giving us the rate for 2 years. And for the 15-16 year, our contribution was 11.97, almost 12%. And then for the 16-17 year, that's when it dropped, but they asked us to add. And so we dropped to 10.66 for the 16-17, 17-18 year. And then for 18-19 and 18-19, we did 10.66, and then the current year we're at 10.16. So.
Okay, you've heard the director's recommendation. Do I hear any discussion or questions? Commissioner Johnson, looks like
Your recommendation.
Stay the same at 10.16. And this also affects our budget, highway, solid waste. We're all on this plan. It also, this rate is what the school board builds on their EAs. All the classified staff is on this same rate.
Move we accept her recommendation.
Okay, I have a motion to accept the recommendation. Do I hear a second? Second, Commissioner Piercy. Any discussion? Hearing none, call roll.
Commissioner Allen?
Yes.
Commissioner Dodd?
Yes.
Commissioner Gooch?
Yes.
Commissioner Johnson?
Yes.
Commissioner Piercy?
Yes.
Commissioner Stevens?
Yes.
Commissioner P?
Yes, motion carries. Thank you, Lisa.
I'd like to Commissioner Piercy and Robert Stevens, the reasons why we are doing all these is this is what we're building our budgets on that we'll be presenting to y'all in a month. Okay, so our last item is a traditional one, and it is the resolution to request unclaimed balance of accounts remitted to the state treasury under the Unclaimed Property Act. Any unclaimed property that we have, we move to the state and then we ask for it back.
Okay, we see this every year. Do I have any questions? Or if not, I'll entertain a motion.
Motion to approve.
Commissioner Dodd makes a motion to approve.
Second.
Second, Commissioner Stevens. Okay, any other questions? Hearing none, call roll.
Commissioner Allen,
Yes.
Commissioner Dodd,
Yes.
Commissioner Gooch,
Yes.
Commissioner Johnson,
Yes.
Commissioner Piercy,
Yes.
Commissioner Stevens,
Yes.
Commissioner P.
Yes, motion carries. Lisa, you better be careful doing such a good job. These guys may get the idea they slough this off on you every time. I want to tell the committee here how much I appreciate you, all of you that are in attendance, and especially you guys that are doing this from home. If I wasn't chairing today, I'd be at home too. It's a little more difficult. You're beginning to see some of you guys that are at home anyway. If you're not talking into the mic, you don't hear, the people at home don't hear, so we need to make sure we do that. The other thing that I've got a question for our IT department is, when you're at home, you don't have the material in front of us that we have on our iPads. And of course, we can get that printed, but that's something we may need to look at if we're going to continue to have to do virtual meetings. And I've got a feeling we'll probably continue this for a while. Is there any other business?
Mr. P, I was just going to say, I actually am on SharePoint. So while I'm on the call with you all, I'm also able to be on SharePoint and see all the same documents as if they were on the iPad.
Perfect, perfect.
Yeah, those documents have been on there for years, and you can read them before the meeting and be prepared without having to have somebody give you a handout or read it there on the iPad at the meeting. So I also was able to access SharePoint and read along tonight and also prepare before the meeting with them as well.
Right, right. So that's good. I have one lone iPad that's capable of transmitting, so I may have to invest in another one if we continue this. Is there any other business before this committee? Hearing none, we're adjourned. Thank you.